What's going on, everybody? With the upcoming download milestone coming to FGO, we should be getting a free 4-star summoning ticket. And in this video, I'm going to talk about some of the 4 stars I would recommend you to pick up. First and foremost, if you have a Waifu or a Husbando that you really want, get them first. For example, if I didn't have Tomoe, I would get her, or even Circe. I really like both of them, but I already have both, so probably not going to go the route. But that's what I recommend. FGO, you can beat this game with like any level of servants, like 3-star, 2-star, 1-star. So if you have a husband or a waifu, get them. That's what I would recommend. And now I'm going to talk about some of the servants you should get if you were looking for more of a gameplay perspective. And the first one I would recommend is Lancelot Berserker if you have a Scotty. Even at MP1, Lancelot Berserker can do some Scotty looping, and that just helps out so much, especially during Lotto events, but even just other nodes, as you can see here, farming for Frost. If you have MP1 Lancelot Berserker, I would also recommend picking up another one for MP2s. I feel like that jump from MP1 to MP2 helps you out so much when looping. For example, during the past Guildfest Lotto, I was actually able to 3-turn all the 3 nodes with an MP2 Zerkalot and double Scotty. And I wouldn't have been able to do that with only an MP1. However, MP1, just getting MP1 is really nice, and you can do looping, just not to extreme as a Guildfest event. The next servant I would recommend is Nitocris. She's an AoE Archcaster, and her MP, even though it doesn't do too much damage, it has a pretty reliable insta-death, and she's one of the only few servants where you can actually say that, where her insta-kill is actually useful and does proc quite often, especially on bronze and silver enemies. Even at MP1, that doesn't really affect her insta-kill mechanic, especially if you level up her first skill. She also has an MP battery in which you can go from 0 to 100, and you'll need to level that up to 8, so it doesn't even require any lures. And yep, she is really strong overall farmer. You can use her pretty much anywhere, and especially during lotteries, before I was able to Scotty loop, she was one of the servants I constantly used for farming, and I think she might have been actually my first or second servant that got to bond 10, just because she's so useful, like pretty much everywhere in the content or everywhere in the game where it requires farming, and farming is a large portion of the game. The next servant I recommend is Parvati. She works really well with the double Scotty and can loop even at MP1. She has kind of like an MP battery, even though it requires some of her MP gauge to use. She has an MP gain skill, and she can loop, as I said, pretty well with Scotty. Scotty loopers are always invaluable, and where Lancelot Berserker can struggle with looping against Berserkers, she would work better than him at that. And she's a soccer face, which is always a plus. The next servant I'm going to recommend is Helena. She's an AoE caster, but you do want to use her more as a support. She has a party-wide 20% MP gauge, an increase of quick buster and art for 3 turns to all allies. She can generate crit stars, and on top of that, her MP is pretty decently damaging, and especially if you hit on her second skill, which has a chance to increase her MP strength. She works really well as, as I said, like a budget support, especially if you don't have like a Waver or a Merlin. She can sort of fill that role with party-wide MP gauge increase, color card damage increase, generating stars. She works as a pretty good support unit that I can recommend for almost any team comp. The next servant I recommend is Artoria Saber Alter. She's an AoE Buster Saber, and her MP damage is pretty comparable to her 5-star form. She has a mana burst on her skill 1, a party-wide attack increase to all allies, and her second skill is currently only a crit scar gain skill, but that'll change in an interlude down the line, or a rank up quest down the line, where it changes to an increase in MP gauge by 20%, which is really nice for farming. We also get her Shinjuku costume later down the line, and she's overall just a fantastic waifu that I love. The next servant I would recommend is Heracles. He is a single target berserker, but the key thing about him is his actual survivability and how annoying he is to take down as a berserker. He has an evade on his second skill, and he has guts, which is really great. And the main thing is, once you get his bond CE, that gives him 3 times guts, and pairing that with his third skill, you can get up to 4 stacks of guts, and that can be really helpful in a lot of challenging quests. Like, for example, during Guildfest, the Taiga quest, he just became my clutch anchor in that, and I was able to solo off Taiga with him. The downside is he's kinda is dependent on his bond CE to be really useful, but still, even if you don't have it, a single target berserker that has a buster MP and it causes defense down with an invade and a guts is already really useful, and just having him as that anchor on more challenging story content or challenge quests is really helpful and something I can recommend to anybody. And the last servant I recommend is Caster Gilgamesh. He has a party-wide attack buff, buff to the party's critical star generation, and a strong single target arts buff to one servant. He's really great for arts comps and works really well also as an offensive support. His MP damage is pretty strong actually, and especially if you don't have like somebody like Tamamo right now, his single target arts buff to an ally is really strong and works well with pretty much any art comp. And finally, I just want to throw out some honorable mentions. There's Emiya Alter, who is, I think, now that he's on his buff, the strongest single target archer we have. But I would recommend holding off if he's not your Husbando, because we get Chloe's rerun with the Prism Ilia event early next year, and you're going to get her to MP5, and that's going to deal more damage than the MP1 Emiya Alter. And she also has a 50% battery. And the last honorable mention I want to give out is Circe. She's kind of like Nitocris with single target. Instead of instant death, she has a chance to turn somebody into a pig, which is basically a free stun. Her first skill will get her MP gauge from 0 to 100, and she's overall pretty strong, but she doesn't deal a lot of damage, especially at MP1. And we just got Caster Shooten. So unless you really like her, I would recommend one of these other servants for gameplay. Let me know down in the comments which servant you're planning to get with the free 4-star ticket. And I hope you enjoyed watching, and I'll see you on the next one. Later.